Hi, I'm Carl Tannenbaum, Chief Economist for Northern Trust, and I'm here with Ryan Boyle, my partner and our Chief U.S. Economist. Ryan, we're going to try and answer all of the questions that clients have had for us recently, and the one that comes up most often is, can we yet tell what impact tariffs are going to have on the American economy?
Well, we learned up front the mere threat of tariffs compels consumers to buy and businesses to order, get ahead of those potential price shocks. So we saw a lot of activity front-loaded this year that's hopefully starting to normalize in the balance of the year. Now, tariffs have since gone into effect, and we haven't seen much evidence in the hard data. They have to show up somewhere. Tariffs are a tax on imports paid by the importer. It's a new cost that has to be spread out somewhere in the value chain. Maybe a price concession by the exporter, maybe cutting into the margins of the importer, or maybe passed on to final prices reluctantly. In the most recent inflation data, we saw some evidence that import-dependent goods were starting to show some month-over-month price gains that were possibly related to tariffs, but overall the evidence has been rather slow, and I think at this point we can rule out that worst-case scenario that we were going to see sudden price shocks due to tariffs. It's more likely to be a slow, steady process.
And it doesn't help that the exact level and application of tariffs is not yet clear, so we'll have to stay tuned for that. Last year, we saw the Federal Reserve cut 3 times for a total of 100 basis points, but they've been stuck since last December. What will it take for them to resume the cutting cycle?
It really comes down to steady, even improving inflation. We went through a bad inflationary cycle, for many of us the worst we'd ever experienced. Now we understand that inflation is painful. The Fed raised rates, as all central banks did, to try to combat it. As inflation came down, they were ready to lower rates somewhat, but we're stuck. The Fed targets 2% PCE inflation on a year-over-year basis, and we haven't hit that target yet. We've been stuck above it. So it was time to slow down as to not overstimulate the economy. Plus, there's this looming risk of potential reflation from those costs of tariffs that haven't yet emerged, but it justifies a patient posture thus far.
The White House has a somewhat different opinion. Do you think that that will factor into upcoming decision-making?
It doesn't need to, and I certainly hope it does not. The Fed needs to remain independent. They are by statute, and markets demand it. And they can justify their next move without any political consideration. The Fed has a mandate from Congress for stable prices and maximum employment. They're making progress on stable prices. Employment has held up well. That should be the only factor justifying their decision. If there's a perception that they're compromised or politically influenced, that could actually lead to higher interest rates, as instability or perceived instability in the U.S. could lead to higher risk premia priced into yields, and that could be counter-effective.
I'm sorry, Ryan, I'm going to have to pin you down. When do you think the next move from the Fed will come?
As long as inflation stays stable, we see a path to a cut in September, or at least the discussion should be lively. There is a risk that we see some reflation between now and then that could give them reason to pause further, but the next move is very likely a cut. It's just a matter of timing, and I think September will be in play.
Okay, well, you're on record as saying that.
Sure.
On the other side of Washington, we have a fiscal package that's in force now. It is certainly big. The beauty is still being debated. But what do you think will be the influence of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act?
Well, the economic news that I'm most comfortable leading with, we removed a lot of uncertainty. So one, we've locked in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act tax rates. Had Congress not acted, we would have seen what would represent a tax hike for most taxpayers, and now those are locked in place. That removes some uncertainty. We raised the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. We don't have to worry about the debt ceiling or a potential technical default, any sort of scenario like that, for several years at this point. So that's good news. Then as we dig into the bill, there's a lot that's best left to the tax professionals, but households gain some benefits through higher state and local tax deductions, some new tax breaks like no taxes on tips and overtime, or deductions for auto loan interest. So we could see some stimulus there on the household side. And then businesses had benefits like immediate expensing of R&D and accelerated depreciation. That could spur some new investment there. So in the near term, very likely stimulative. Long term, as we know, whatever the debt ceiling is, we will eventually issue debt that meets it. So we will become a more indebted nation in due course, and that could be challenging to yields.
A lot of analysts caved and called for a recession as the tariff clouds were gathering. You held out, and so far you've been right. How far do you think this expansion can go?
I think the story of this cycle, much like the post-pandemic cycle, comes down to the labor market. There are reasons to be nervous. If you read any headlines any day of the week, you can find things that could be going wrong, might be a reason to expect we'll see something bad, but we've held up. We haven't been nervous about our own job prospects. We're still seeing job creation continue, and that is overall good news. Now, we can perceive the economy might not feel great, but households are doing okay. And as long as we hold our jobs, we can keep spending. As long as we keep spending, we can grow through the uncertainty. Even if it's a different type of uncertainty today than it may have been over the past few years, I think that thesis can still hold up.
Well, I certainly hope you're right, Ryan. Thank you very much for your thoughts. And everybody, thanks for joining us. If you want more on these and other topics, please visit northerntrust.com, Insights and Research. We'll see you next time.